All right, grown-ups, it's just our time. I love the babies, but to help you, I gotta speak my mind. This segment's here to help you grow with book reviews, lessons, and things you'll be glad to know. If your little one's restless or looking to play, send them to my other playlist. The read-alouds there will brighten their day. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome back to the Teacher Lady Show. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Teacher Lady Speaks. I'm Miss Erica, the Teacher Lady, your fairy godparent when it comes to sharing joyful stories and growing young minds. Now, every single week on the Teacher Lady Show, we have a new topic. And this week's topic is all about safety, not fear-based safety, not scared of the world safety, but procedural safety, the kind that gives children confidence and awareness and clear steps of what to do when something does not feel right, okay? So we're talking about stranger danger. We're talking about what to do when you're interacting with authority or police officers, so on and so forth. So the goal of this topic is to make you as a caregivers more aware of things that children should know, well, to keep them safe. And of course, we're using picture books to be able to do so. Now, this week's featured book is called The Talk. And I really love this resource because it talks about things that most children will not understand. And that is how other people might perceive them and what to do to make sure that they are kept as safe as possible. Okay. So on Monday, we had that interactive read aloud on The Talk. On Wednesday, we had the behind the book review where I let you know how can you use this book as a resource to have a more robust conversation with your little one. And today, Friday, we are wrapping it all up with this episode of the Teacher Lady Speaks. Here on this episode, I will use my experience teaching tiny humans to help enhance your experience raising them, okay? Now, this is done through resources, insight, and honest reflection from a well-seasoned educator. Hey, that's me that understands just how hard love work can be. I get it, okay? All right, now that is enough of an overview. You ready? Let's grow. Defining the topic for a child. So I would explain that safety are the things that keep us well. Like what keeps us physically okay? That might be seat belts or making sure your shoes are tied. It could be a helmet. And then what keeps us mentally okay? Who are our friends? Who are we spending time with? What are the things that we're listening to and ultimately believing? There's also safety in the sense of spatial and social awareness. Who is around me? Who is talking to me? How am I feeling comfortable or uncomfortable? So this one is going to have to be broken down into different categories. But overall, safety rules or procedures are set in place to make sure that we are okay, and make sure that our body feels as good as it possibly can, as well as our mind, and ultimately to protect us. Now, every single week, we look at two states to figure out what it is that your child might be learning in school pertaining to that topic, okay? So we compare the state of California to the state of Texas to better understand curriculum. And in regards to safety, in California, procedural safety is embedded across the health education standards and the state's transformative social and emotional learning framework. Beginning in kindergarten, students learn to identify trusted adults and understand basic personal safety rules. As they move through grades 1 through 3, students are taught how to recognize unsafe situations, practice refusal skills, which is so important. They need to know when to say no. They need to know when to articulate that they're uncomfortable, so on and so forth, and understand when and how to seek help from adults or emergency services. Now, by grades 4 through 6, students expand their understanding to include communication with authority, decision-making in public spaces, and managing fear or uncertainty while staying safe. California's transformative social-emotional learning competencies further support this learning by emphasizing self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, and relationship skills, which are all critical components of teaching children how to protect themselves while remaining connected, confident, and emotionally regulated, okay? Now, in Texas, procedural safety is addressed through the health education, knowledge, and skill framework, which focuses on personal safety, communication, and help-seeking behaviors. In grades K through 2, students learn basic safety rules, how to identify trusted adults, and how to respond appropriately to unsafe situations. By grades 3 to 5, students are taught how to recognize risky situations, practice refusal skills, communicate clearly with adults and authority figures, and understand emergency responses. These standards emphasize assertive communication, situational awareness, and confidence in seeking help. Overall, I would say that Texas prioritizes teaching children practical safety knowledge while enforcing emotional regulation, responsibility, and respect for themselves. Okay. Now, when it comes to safety, because it's such a broad list, what you want to do and think about is, what are the things that I need my child to understand on a basic level? And so for me, when it came to state curriculum, both states fall short. Both states fail to teach children to identify the telltale signs of a dangerous adult or a dangerous situation. Both states fail to have clear curriculum and lesson plans around safety in a way in which I think works for young children. And just overall, there feels like there needs to be more. I know sometimes schools will have programs specifically around fire safety or domestic issues or even drugs. But in my opinion, it should be embedded into the state's curriculum and standards. And so for me, it's a little bit of a miss this week. Let's move on to resources, because we can supplement with what the state is not doing to make sure that our children still understand what it means to be safe. So the first resource I'm going to discuss is a teacher lady favorite, and that is Sesame Streets and Communities. They have a safety and emergencies website, and this is going to offer gentle videos and activities teaching children how to identify safe adults, talk about fears, and handle emergencies in age-appropriate ways. So there is something about the puppets and just overall it being very childlike that really helps children to start to understand some of these harder and bigger concepts. The next is going to be the National Child Traumatic Stress Network, NCTSN. And this is going to have resources that help caregivers talk to children about safety without causing anxiety. And this includes guidance on police interactions and overall emergencies. The next resource I would like for you to look into is called Safe Kids Worldwide. They're going to offer practical everyday safety resources covering walking safety and public spaces, emergencies, and community awareness. The next resource I'm going to bring your attention to is called Love is Respect, and they have a youth-friendly section on their website, but this is really tools for teaching boundaries, consent, and saying no. It's framed in a way that children and teenagers can understand. And overall, safety, and a huge component of safety, is ensuring when you can self-advocate and protect yourself and articulate those clear boundaries. So definitely check out this website for more support around that. The next website is called Teaching Tolerance, formerly known as Learning for Justice. Now, this is going to have classroom and family resources that balance safety education with equity, cultural awareness, and respectful authority interactions. Okay, so those resources are there for you to check out. In addition, I'm going to bring your attention to a few others. So the next resource I want you to look into is called Kids Smart. They have a National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Kids Smart is a comprehensive safety education program developed by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And this teaches children of various ages about real-world risk and how to respond to them. It goes beyond the outdated concept of stranger danger by helping children understand when and where they might be at risk and what practical steps they can take to make sure that they are safe. Okay. The next one is Kid Power, Teen Power, Full Power International, nonprofit that offers safety education geared towards building skills, confidence, and practical responses for children, teens, and adults. The program includes clear guidance for recognizing unsafe situations, setting boundaries, and communicating assertively, and knowing how to seek help from trusted adults and authority. The next resource is Talking About Stranger Safety, And this is a Scholastic resource. So this is from Scholastic Parents. The Scholastic article on talking about stranger safety provides parents with age-tailored strategies to have calm, realistic conversations about safety rather than scaring them. So often in the midst of us trying to teach our children how important something is, we scare them. And fear is not the best tactic when teaching a child to be safe, because we want them to lock in with us. We want them to have a clear mind. And so if we're just scaring them, we're not overall getting our point across. Okay. And the last resource I'm going to discuss for now, of course, if you need more, be sure to go to my website, scroll all the way to the bottom, give me your email address, and I will send out a newsletter with additional resources. But the next resource we're going to discuss for now is called the Rose Brucia Stranger Safety Awareness Program. Now, the Rose Brucia Stranger Safety Awareness Program offers free curriculum materials aimed at elementary age children to introduce proactive stranger safety concepts. This is developed for educators and caregivers. The curriculum is going to include educational videos, suggested lesson plans, and just overall give you tools to be able to raise a child that knows how to keep themselves safe. Okay. Best practices. The first best practice when it comes to safety is to understand what your child is going to be most at risk of. Okay. So if you have a child who is larger body or differently abled, their safety might look like bullying. It might look like being mistreated or being picked on, which there is an entire week about bullying if you need to, explore that with your child. If you have a young Black son, their safety might be geared more towards police interactions and authority and people making stereotypes and assumptions and negative assumptions about them. If you have a young girl, their safety might be around predatory behaviors. And so looking at your child and thinking about what issues are they most likely to face. If they live in a certain neighborhood and that neighborhood has more drug activity, that is an element in which you'll want to discuss with them around safety around drugs, safety around guns. And so for this really isn't this one size fits all topic. It really is understanding your child and understanding the things in which your child needs to know in order to keep themselves safe. That is my best practice. So for me, I have a kid, a young Black girl, who is extremely talkative and way too trusting of strangers. So she will go up to a stranger and say, "Oh my gosh, I love your outfit. You look so pretty." And the stranger will say, "Oh, I like this about you." And then she'll try to hold an entire conversation. And it is important for me as her parent, knowing my child, regardless of even her being Black or otherwise, that she understands that people could take advantage of that is a way for sometimes people to be sneaky or for them to do things that are not appropriate or okay because they feel comfortable very quickly being able to do so. And so I need my child to understand that not everybody is having the same conversation that she has. For me, my child and her body awareness, okay, my kid will do a cartwheel, no problem. She will flip, she'll jump off of something, she'll spin in a circle. And I need her to understand how her body clashing with another body is a safety issue. I need her to understand how not everybody wants to see your newest trick. I need her to understand that it doesn't feel good to be bumped into or to be hit. I need her to be aware of her body. That is a safety issue that she experiences because of how she is automatically and naturally. And so looking at your child and saying, okay, what is it that they need to know? Not this blanket list of rules. Don't ever speak to a stranger. That's not realistic. Or, if somebody looks at you too long, call 911. That's a waste of a phone call. So it's not this blanket list of safety things and paranoia things, but overall knowing my child, What is it that they need to understand? For my daughter, I need her to understand what her Blackness has meant historically in this country. I need her to understand about her body language. I need her to understand social awareness and just culturally how people communicate in our country. I need her to understand all sorts of things, right? When somebody says, hey, how's your day going? They don't actually want to hear about your life story and how difficult the math test was. And oh my gosh, I can't believe it took so long. All of those are elements of safety. Understanding our social norms is a form of safety. Understanding effective communication is a form of safety. Knowing what to do when you're faced with a difficult or a hard situation is a form of safety. Understanding that, sure, you can compliment a stranger on their outfit, but if they then say, hey, well, would you like to come home and see what other outfits I have? You absolutely not. Move from around me. That's weird, right? You need to understand that. So the first step, and you can literally like pause this video and go get a pen and a paper, write out the design of your child. Like literally write them out. Okay, I have a child who constantly wants to be included. And so they're willing to pretty much do anything for social acceptance, for community acceptance. They want friends and they're willing to do anything for friends. Well, that is going to be their red flag when it comes to safety. And so teaching them to make decisions for themselves, teaching them about peer pressure, teaching them when to say no, teaching them that it is okay to be alone, and teaching them what good friendships look like would all be applicable for your child, because you have a child who is willing and eager to kind of be included, right? That's one thing. You might have another child, and that child constantly looks angry. And what do I mean by that? I mean, their face is scrunched up and their fist is scrunched up and they got this hoodie over their head and they don't really want to be seen and they're walking around like this. For that child, perception is going to be extremely important, and how other people view them. And not even that they have to be this whole other person, but the understanding is going to be crucial. You need to know how this world views you. Not every single person in the world, but there are unspoken rules when it comes to judgment of people. And I will be the first to tell you that your child, if developmentally able, needs to understand code switching. They need to know when it's safe to blast music and when to be aware of their surroundings. They need to understand when to talk to a police officer and when to request their parent, which honestly should be immediately, unless it's like, hey, have a good day. If I interact with an officer and I am a child, ask for my parent immediately. They need to know these things. I have a background of working with children who are autistic, and I have a background of working with children who do not have the best kind of social awareness skills, right? They're very literal children. I remember my first child that I worked with who was autistic really helped me to become super organized, because what happened was I was always running a few minutes behind, just off schedule, just kind of march to the beat of my own clock, right? And I remember introducing the schedule, and it was a visual schedule. And on that visual schedule, it said that at 11:30 we would go to lunch. And I had a analog clock in my classroom. And I remember that child looking at the clock and being like, it's 11:30. It's 11:30. We have to go to lunch. It's 11:30. And I was like, yeah, but we chilling. We got to clean up. And it's 11:30. It's 11:30. We have to go to lunch. It's 11:30. And what that did for me, right, here's one of my detours, but what it did for me was made me realize, oh, your words have meaning. Don't just be saying you're going to lunch at 11:30 and then wing it because you're the one who takes them to lunch and it just kind of is what it is. Now, on the flip side of that, I needed that student to understand that, yes, you are correct. I said 11:30 and I will do better at keeping that time. Also, there are situations that are sometimes out of our control. Sometimes the schedule was 11:30, but now we're not going to 11:40 because it's raining outside, because I don't have enough staff to keep the students that have to stay inside for whatever various reasons. And so Getting your child to understand that there is a practical and a particular answer, as well as a social norm answer, as well as circumstances changing, is going to be important. Teaching that child, to remind me, but to tell me one time, I don't need the repetition, and letting them know how that makes other people feel. Now, I am a safe place for you to act it out. You can tell me it's 11, 30, 50 times, but I want you to understand that when you go into the world and when you get a job, that can feel kind of sucky for some people. And so teaching your child the survival skills and the social skills needed in order for them to be okay in this big, scary world is the most valuable component of safety. What is going to be safe for one child in one neighborhood is not going to be safe for another child in another neighborhood. What is going to be safe for one child who is, in a general classroom is not going to be safe for another child who has a developmental difference. Safety looks different for every type of child, and understanding that will help you to put together a curriculum and a plan that makes the most sense for your kid. Okay. So if you go through these resources that I mentioned earlier, you listen to some of these best practice that I'm saying, you'll be able to sit down and really think about who your child is and the things that they need to know and understand. And then the last best practice I would say is for your child to understand that the music and the movies and the social media that they're listening to are not all real. And even if they are real, they are not real for them. Okay, we are not becoming gangsters, and we don't have to have 10 plastic surgeries in order to look okay and be okay. And we don't have to dress like this in order to get a boyfriend, so on and so forth. You're going to have to combat the things that they're constantly hearing and interpreting as true for themselves. You're going to have to fight against that. You're going to have to combat that, because that is becoming their truth. And that is a safety issue, right? For you to constantly be listening to music that tells you as a young Black boy, you have to behave this way, you have to sound this way, you have to look this way. That's dangerous. And so you're going to make sure to explain what is for entertainment and what is true and what is not true, and how that's not applicable to your life. And if it becomes too much, take it away. I always say, if that child is angry already, we're not turning on NBA YoungBoy. We're not turning on some music that's going to make you angrier. We're not going to encourage the thing that we're actively trying to fight against in that moment. So my best practice is to know your kid. And I say this, I feel like every video, the more that you understand your child, the more that you're able to protect your child, the more that you're able to put things in place that can support your child. Okay? It's not about being scared or being fearful, but it is about equipping them to be as independent as possible and to have an awareness of how to keep themselves and the people around them safe. Let's keep growing. When to seek help. If your baby is paranoid, if they're constantly worried about germs making them sick, or going outside, or talking to a new person, if you feel like it is to a point to where they cannot function because they have an overwhelming kind of just stressor when it comes to being safe, go get them some additional support and help. Go talk to your guidance counselor. Go talk to the doctor if need be. Try to incorporate some of the best practices from my other video. I have a week on fear and I have a week on being brave. Some of those techniques might help with some of this. But if you notice, okay, we're doing the breathing exercises, we're doing the check-ins, the writing, they're in art classes and nothing seems to be helping, go seek additional support. Every child is different. And sometimes there are things that are going on with our children that are beyond our pay grade. Okay. We do not have the information and the insight and the resources to be able to help them, even though our desire is there. And whenever that happens, you're going to go get some outside and additional support. Let's keep growing. Common questions. How do I teach stranger danger without scaring my child? So I don't actually believe you should teach stranger danger. I don't think that your child should be scared of anybody they don't know. Okay. I have children. I'll be at the park minding my own business, and they'll come up to me talking. And the first thing I'm looking for is a parent to make sure that it's okay. But you don't want children to have a fear of anybody that they don't know. That isn't good. And this term became popularized and people started talking about it as if it was this great concept. And it's not. The man at the ice cream parlor giving you your ice cream is a stranger. The person who is sweeping the grocery store is a stranger. We're surrounded by strangers. Instead of stranger danger, I would teach them awareness. Why do you need to go off with somebody? That doesn't make sense. Teach them critical thinking. Teach them to analyze situations and social interactions. This person that I don't know wants to give me candy. That's a bit odd. Teach them a healthy level of being skeptical. And if you need support with this, there is a whole week on critical thinking that really helps to build that muscle of just analyzing the situation that's in front of you. I've had it to where somebody has complimented me and I'm like, thank you. You look beautiful today. Thank you. Well, can I get your number and take you out? No, absolutely not. I'm continuing on about my day. But the interaction of you look beautiful is one thing. The escalation of the number and the date and the whatever is another. And so I don't believe that stranger danger itself is a good way to kind of teach awareness. I think instead you focus on feelings and emotions. You focus on the request of the person and overall just how you're feeling about the overall interaction, because that will teach you how to respond. The next question I have is, should children always listen to adults? And to that I say no. I have an entire week on questioning authority, on adults being wrong and that they make mistakes too. And I think that it is important for children, again, to be able to analyze situation by situation. As a mom, as an educator, as a wife, as all of these titles, I make a great deal of mistakes and errors. Now, they're not intentional, but they happen. And my child should be able to bring something to my attention just like my husband should be able to bring something to my attention. If I didn't sign the permission slip and I told her that it would be on the table, it is completely okay for her to come and say, hey, you told me the permission slip was going to be in my backpack on the table. And when I showed up at school, it wasn't there. And then I can say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, I forgot. And I can acknowledge what it is I did, and then I can move on. But to be raised in a home where the adult can never make a mistake, or I can never question them, or I can never comment, creates a child that does not know their own voice. They don't know how to speak up. They don't know how to hold a conversation because it's been consistently shut down. So just be mindful. You are your child's first practice in a lot of things. I don't believe that it's disrespectful for a child to talk back. I believe in a lot of ways talking back is required to hold a conversation. So some of these old mentalities that we were raised with, I question a lot of them. And I think that we should too. There's a difference between being disrespectful and asking a question. There's a difference between being rude and holding a conversation. So just be aware that if you're a parent that does not allow your child to question you or on anything, or, to hold a conversation with you. And if you're the type to be like, get out grown folks' business, as they grow older, they're going to struggle to understand their own voice because they didn't get the opportunity to practice. Let's keep growing. The last question is going to be, how do I talk about police safety? So again, this is going to depend heavily on a child that you're raising. I know in my household, when it comes to belief, we teach that there is a level of being skeptical that is healthy. Because historically speaking, police officers have been a huge danger for Black families. And so my child should have an awareness of that. Again, it doesn't mean that she should be paranoid. It doesn't mean she shouldn't call 911 if need be, but there needs to be a general understanding around the history of some of these things. Now, I also teach my child that if ever the school calls her to the office to sit down and talk to a police officer for whatever reason, just like as an adult, we're told to call a lawyer, they should be calling me. Police should not be talking to your child without your permission. They should, if you have a child that's a minor, they should be reaching out to you. And I would definitely teach your child any race. If your child is white, Black, whatever else, I would teach them that when it comes to having a conversation with a police officer, it needs to go through me first. And so I need to be contacted. So overall, I would explain the point of police and what they're supposed to be, which is people who are in our community keeping us safe and protecting us. I would explain the times in which that was not the case and some of the issues that we're still facing today, which again, there is an entire week on social justice. I encourage you to look at, to have these conversations with your child. And then I would explain that if they ever wanted to communicate, that I should be contacted as the adult and part of that conversation. It is completely okay to say some doctors are great and they help us get better. And also, historically speaking, Black women have had a harder time getting the proper medical care that they've needed. Like, it is okay to be honest with your child about the world that we live in, because it's the world that we live in. It is our reality. And so they should understand both. Just like anything else, there are some that's good, there are some that are not. And having that awareness is going to go a long way. So I hope that you got some ways in which you can now think about safety with your child. I hope that this episode encouraged you to take a deeper look at your child and your family dynamic and the things that they need to know. I hope that this episode encourages you to go check out other episodes that might help to answer some of the questions you have, like critical thinking or self-advocacy or even social justice. Thank you so much for learning with me, for growing with me, and for being part of this book-loving community. If you did not know, I am also an author and illustrator, and I encourage you to go check out my diverse line of children's books. But I also want you to take a look at something called the Empathy Library, which was encouraged by my books. And the Empathy Library is a pay-it-forward program where we get books to children in need on purpose, no cost to them by way of your generosity. So go check out the Empathy Library, check out my books, look at the other episodes that we discussed. Thank you for learning with me, for growing with me, and for being part of this book-loving community. Until next time, remember to enjoy the moment or go be a joy in the moment. Bye.